Thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to be delighted, if I could speak, delighted with a lovely workshop on two paths. Many times we will have to take both of these paths to get to the path that we ultimately want to, but we are going to learn about, do you want to go through the successful path or the failure path? Ladies and gentlemen of 80/20 and recently named to the Coastal Virginia Tidewater Region's Inside Business Entrepreneur Excellence Award.
Wow. President
and founder of Successful Path Business 80/20.
Wow. Thanks, Zach. That's pretty amazing. Wow. All right. I appreciate that. All right. So what Zach was talking about was, do you want to take the successful path or the unsuccessful path? So what I'm going to actually talk about is, I don't think it's an either or. I think you take both. You have to take both to get to where you're going. So interesting title here, but a couple caveats. I'm not going to actually try to tie my talk into the book at all. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know what the book was about until this morning when I did a little Google search and realized it was about something completely different than what I wanted to talk about. It was just kind of a catchy title. But yeah, let's talk about failure, let's talk about success, and are the two linked? All right, so a little bit about me for those that don't know who I am, and if you want some more information besides what Zach just said, I run 80/20. We're a software company across the street. I'm the CEO. I'm also a programmer. Here's my information. If you guys tweet, there's my Twitter handle. And then about 80/20, we provide software applications and consulting, so very data-intensive enterprise-level applications. We also help startups as well. Okay, so how many of you are familiar with these sayings? Fail fast, fail often, fail forward, fail fast, fail cheap. Does any of this ring a bell? You hear about it all the time, especially in the Silicon Valley venture capital environment. They're always talking about failing, 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 and they celebrate it. It's kind of strange. If you Google, you're going to find a ton of stuff out there about failing. It's actually kind of strange how much information you will find about failing. There's books about it, there's charts, there's probably what's intended for a t-shirt. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff about failing out there. So why do we care about failing? We're not in this to fail, right? We're in this to succeed. There's a lot of stats out there. Actually, it was a little bit difficult for me to find a very definitive statistic, but I found a couple that give you a range, and I'm sure these numbers are not going to surprise you at all. Somewhere between 50 and 90% of startups fail. Again, it was very difficult for me to pinpoint exactly what that number was because I got some conflicting sources here, but certainly a very, very high failure rate. So we care about failure because we don't want to end up in one of these statistics. We want to end up in the successful bucket. All right, so failing is celebrated, but we want to be successful, so we want to not fail. We want to be winners. Do winners actually fail? So I thought about a couple of scenarios of historical people that I've read up on. I was actually kind of geeking out about 2 years ago on the American Revolution. Read a bunch of books on it, and this one really surprised me. So do you guys know who this person is?
George Washington.
This is George Washington. Probably wouldn't categorize him as a failure. But actually, throughout his career, he had a ton of failures, and I've listed a bunch here. First two have to do with his personal life. He was seeking to get married. He proposed several times, and he was rejected several times. He was seen by his suitors as unfit. So in his personal life, he failed. In his military life, he failed. In the very beginning of his military career, he had to surrender to the French in the French and Indian War. And as a consequence of that, he was demoted and he was stripped of his command.
in the very beginning of his military career. That's horrible. I mean, that is something that most people do not bounce back from. But he did. He kept working on his career. He narrowly escaped the total destruction of the Continental Congress in New York. This is a big one here. This doesn't get talked about that much. Benedict Arnold was kind of like an outcast in the military, and George Washington trusted in him and spoke up for him and gave him the command. He basically endorsed Benedict Arnold and gave him the command of West Point. What did Benedict Arnold do in return? He became a traitor. He tried to sell the plans for West Point to the British, and he got caught, and it was devastating to George Washington because he had personally endorsed this person who became a traitor and then actively fought against the Americans for years. So many failures here. Even after the Revolutionary War was effectively complete, the American military almost overthrew the U.S. government, or what was then, the Continental Congress. Washington talked them out of it. So you can sum this up as a lot of failure. But do we consider George Washington a failure? No, clearly not. This is how history remembers George Washington. A great American hero. He's on the dollar bill, right? There's a lot of positive things you could say about George Washington, but he had to go through those failures before he got to the successes that he sought. A couple other examples from history. Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb. This is his famous quote about failing. No, he doesn't consider it a failure. He just considers that he tried something that didn't work 10,000 times before he got to the point where it did work. Edison was considered crazy by a lot of his scientific peers for trying to do what he did. But he revolutionized the world. He invented the light bulb. Michael Jordan, if you guys haven't heard of this story, he did not make the cut for his high school basketball team. He hadn't actually started growing to his full height and strength when he tried out, and they basically told him he should not play basketball. So for anyone that's not familiar with Michael Jordan, considered probably the best athlete of all time, never mind the best basketball player.
Junior year he made it.
Right, but when he first tried out, he did not make the varsity team. That's amazing. And imagine what a blow that is to your self-confidence. Theodore Roosevelt, another historical figure. Actually, people credit him for really not even getting the United States out of the Depression. They credit World War II for that. Even though he was the president at the time, some consider part of his presidency a failure for various reasons, maybe political, I don't know. But he talks about failure as well. All right, so what's the pattern here?
You have to fail in order to succeed.
Very good. There's going to be failure in your life, in your career. And if you want to continue to, the pattern? You seen the pattern? It's a pattern. That's the pattern. Yeah. So if you stop at failure, you'll probably never get past that and succeed. All right, so that's historical, but let's put this into perspective. So I want to talk about some of my failures and what I've done as a result of those failures. So failure number one is my first software as a service offering. It was called measuredmile.com. If you go to that URL right now, you're not going to see this because I abandoned it years ago. Think about Angie's List. Angie's List connects homeowners with contractors. I had that idea back in '99 timeframe, and this is what actually got me into programming the way that I program today. It was a pet project. I worked on it, ended up investing $5,000 to hire a freelancer to get this site up and running. I was selling advertising, I was doing all sorts of stuff. My $5,000 turned into a $30 return on that investment. So I put 5,000 in, I got 30 bucks out. That's all I made on the site. And I kind of gave up. Now this is actually a screenshot from the Wayback Machine because I don't have the code running anymore. But what did I learn from that whole experience, right? Sure, it was a failure. For sure, it was a failure. I lost money, I lost a lot of time, but I actually got a lot out of it. So, what did I learn? I learned that if I build something, they're not going to come. Even in '99, back in the early days of the internet, it was very, very crowded. You can't just build it and hope that your customers show up. That was a huge lesson learned for me. I didn't market it. I didn't have a sales plan. I really didn't know how I was going to make money. There were a lot of things I didn't know going into it. I didn't even think about it. And I had no path to profitability at all. I just kind of threw it out there and I was hoping for the best. And then, actually, I probably should have got paid like 60 bucks total revenue. But I put an ad up for someone, and it was supposed to be a $30 payment, and I got stiffed. Yeah, so another lesson learned. So several lessons learned there, but I did get something positive out of it. Not only these lessons, but I got enough skill set as a programmer where I was able to go get my first job as a programmer. Failure number 2, artsandcraftsfair.com. Long time ago as well. Day after Thanksgiving, family wanted to go to a real life arts and crafts fair and they dragged me along. And I'm walking around, I'm bored out of my mind, and there's a bunch of people selling a bunch of stuff that they made there. And I noticed one vendor had up here on their sign over their booth their web address. And once I noticed that, sorry about that. Once I noticed that one vendor had a website, I noticed that no one else there did. Not a single one. And I thought, wow, there's hundreds of vendors here selling thousands of products. All of those products can be described in data. This is a business opportunity. So I bought artsandcraftsfair.com. I built the site. I got it up and running, and I actually made money on this one. Not a ton, but we were up to about $1,000 a month in billing. But I also didn't really invest personally in this one. As far as my passion, my energy, I'm not a crafter. And it ended up failing. I didn't put any work into it, and it just kind of withered away. So I eventually shut it down. And in retrospect, what did I learn? Well, I didn't have a passion for that business at all. As a matter of fact, these little kinds of arts and crafts things, I can't stand them. I just don't like it. It's not for me. So I didn't have any passion in the product that was being sold. The user experience and quality control was bad, as you can see from the screenshot. It's not pretty. It was good enough. It was data driven. That's all I really cared about. And then also I started this project as a free product. So vendors could sign up and they could put their products up there. And then at one point I decided I wanted to make some money off of this thing. So I started to charge. And I had 220 so vendors with a couple thousand products at the time. And I decided everyone's going to pay. And I anticipated that I was going to lose 50% of those vendors. So it's going to go from 220 to 110. That was the plan. I went from 220 down to 22. I lost 90% of my users. And I didn't know how to respond. And I was stubborn. And if people weren't going to pay me for all my hard work, I didn't want them. But I lost 90% of the customers. It was a mistake. I should have handled it better. So certainly going from free to paid was a big, big lesson learned to me, how to handle that. And I see entrepreneurs run into this problem all the time, still to this day. They think that they can build something, get the customers, and then charge those same customers for that service. And they need a better plan than that. From my personal experience, that did not work, and that wasn't the first time I made that mistake. Wasn't the last time, I should say. Yeah. All right. The last failure is syntactical. So before I had 80/20, I was a partner in a Navy contracting company. I did that for 4 years. And we were small, profitable, very profitable. We made a ton of money, actually. But there was just something missing. We never could really get that next client or the next several clients. And when the program went up for rebid, we were not part of a winning team. And the winning contractor got rid of us and brought in their own people. That's what happens in Navy contracting if you don't play the game well, and we didn't play it well. So we ended up shutting that down, and that's when I jumped over to commercial. So, what did I learn from that? It was 4 years. I made a living off of it for 4 years, and I actually made a good amount of money as well. So I wouldn't really say it's a total failure, but it didn't last like I hoped that it would. So in retrospect, what were the lessons learned? We had one main client, and that was a problem. Not only was it a problem that we just had one, because a client can change their minds at the drop of a hat without any justification. The other problem was we didn't have a contractual relationship with that client. The way the DoD works is you rarely get to go directly to a particular DoD government program manager and get a contract with him or her. You're going through some big program and you're second or third tier down the pecking order. We were actually a third or fourth tier subcontractor. So although our government program manager loved us, we had no ability to affect what happened in the end. I also had a partner. We were 50-50 owners, each of us. And it's tough. It is very tough to align your goals and aspirations to your partners. We were mostly the same in the beginning, and then we started to deviate towards the end. We just wanted different things out of the company, and it was very difficult to reconcile that. So yeah, we didn't align. Our visions for the company just didn't align towards the end. And then also, this was the first company, real company, that I had run, and I didn't pay attention to the culture at all. I just paid attention to things like revenue and getting work done. And so we didn't invest in our people and the culture that we were creating, nothing. And we had cultural issues. So for me, a big eye-opener was, next time around, I'm going to focus on the culture. I want to make sure I get the right people in place. I'm not going to hire someone if they have the skills, but they just have a bad attitude, as an example. That's important. It's really important. Other failures, frankly, there's a ton. I've given another talk where I go through 3 or 4 more examples like this. I didn't really want to bore you with too many details about all my failures, but Zach mentioned that yesterday I got an award. It was in this inside business, and there was a reception yesterday. And I don't even want to say that I feel like I'm successful. I don't feel like that yet. I feel like we're still going through this. We haven't made it, and I feel a little bit odd actually giving a talk about how failure leads to success, because you never know what's going to happen. And I'm very fearful of all of this falling apart. I'm paranoid. But I also embrace failure when it happens to make sure that I understand why it happened and we can correct. So, will we be here in a year? I don't know. Will we be here in 10 years? I don't know. I hope so. But you just never know where this is going. All you can really do is hang on during the ride, understand when you did something well, when you did something not well, and learn from the times where you did something not so great and correct it for the next time. So, interestingly, Zach and I were talking about this yesterday, and he showed me a list that he had put together of his failures. So I wanted to hand this over to Zach for a minute and have you step everyone through a couple of your failures. Now, the reason I'm bringing them up is because we're in Hatch. This is an ecosystem that Zach has created from scratch, and I think we'd all consider this to be a success, or else we wouldn't be here. So, has this enterprise had some failures?
I need that mic next to me too. You can keep it on. I was next. So, I was thinking about doing this as a blog post, but then realized that there are probably some things that I can't necessarily go into. But here's the list. And so these are all things, all businesses or ideas that I had or been a part of in the last 5 years. So the list is long, right? And I'll name some of them. And so it's anything from an idea that I had at a bar and started working on it, to an investment that we made, to a conference. So here are some things. Spark Route, Wad Diary, Air Talk, Drop Anchor. So Drop Anchor was the big conference that we couldn't get off the ground. Podium Pro, Our Care Direct, Vinyl Mint, Reality Bridges, UVest, CampusWise, Go Wedding Pro, RoboCent, 9 to 5 Jobs, Peruzzi, Silicon Anchor. That was a media company that we had. Maybe you guys remember it. Basically, it's been dwarfed into Hatch. Yep. But ultimately, I would look at that and say, well, maybe that's how the TV show came around too. Some things that you guys probably know about. Before Coffee Downtown, we did something called Start or Open Coffee, where we would go around to different coffee shops and no one would show up, or like 1 or 2 people would show up. What we learned from that was that consistency is important, and being at the same place is important, and doing it at the same time is important. So earlier this year, I wanted to create a rewards application through Facebook's API, to only find out that once we started working on it, that Facebook didn't allow us to do it for some reason. Erik and I worked on 2 projects together. One of them was called Kingmakers. We were trying to do content on demand, where someone would want a blog post, and we would write the content for them. And basically, we tried doing this without having to do any of the work. We wanted to find people through Fiverr and Craigslist, and people just didn't show up, so people weren't willing to do it. And then this other thing called The Pitch. The Pitch was a place where you could, as a founder of a company or someone that was looking at starting a company, get real-time feedback on that idea. We charged $5 for people to do it, and I think we made $125 on it. Interestingly enough, though, there was an investment group that wanted to invest in it, or asked us to go deeper into it. But for whatever reason,
it just kind of petered out.
We just didn't do it. So last year we tried creating a content course for real estate agents called Steak and Eggs. Never tested anything, spent an entire month on it. It's a beautiful thing, but we didn't do any of the things that we always preach, and we lost 30 days worth of time through 3 or 4 people. Let's see. I wrote a book once. It made $3,000. It trickles and makes $3 to $10 a month, but it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. Then I tried selling event concepts called Sellvent. I created a blog called Startup Nerd. We wrote 2 grants from the SBA, lost both of those. I tried writing a book called 5 Book Marketing. That didn't work. A meetup called Tech and Eggs. A marketing lunch meetup. That didn't work. The Great Meetup Challenge. Nope. Carrie Norfolk, kind of. Hatch 2 Investments, definitely. And a Kickstarter called the Great Paper Airplane Race.
I remember that.
So, you look at all these things, and if you don't take the risk, you don't learn from it. And so whenever when we don't eat our own dog food, we lose, right? But failing happens. I don't necessarily like the word failure because I think it's too negative. I think it's really just a learning experience. Think of a business as an infant, and then it's got to learn how to crawl and do all those things. But it's a journey, and I think had we quit at some point during that, we wouldn't be where we are today. And knowing that, and I think all too often, if you have something validated, you have customers, and you have something that people want, you should never die. Your business should never die. It's when you don't have something that people want, it was when those things go down.
But you find that through failure, right?
Sure.
You find out. So, cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Woo! Let's clap it up. Failure Olympics.
So it's not so much that we want to fail.
That was a lot.
Yeah, you had a lot of failures. Hey, I only listed 3 of mine. But yeah, so we're not looking to fail. I wouldn't even say that we celebrate failure, kind of like the West Coast mentality has you believe. I probably wouldn't do a blog post or tell my clients how we failed necessarily, but I'm not going to hide it either. So I'm not ashamed to talk about it, as long as it's within the context of learning. It's all a journey, and we haven't got to the end yet. Now, if you fail and you stop, you're at the end. So, takeaways. I showed you several examples of very successful people in history. 2 current people that are working at it still. Failure, it's okay. It happens. You just need to learn from it. Actually, going to this first bullet, if you don't ever fail, it really just means that you're not trying and you're not going to succeed. If you try, you're going to fail at something. If someone tells you everything was super easy, I didn't make any mistakes, it was so easy because I'm so awesome,
They're lying.
they're lying. Your bullshit detector should be going off. It's not true. You make mistakes. That is part of the journey. So continue to fail, learn from it, don't give up. If you believe in what you're doing, you're going to fail. So don't get discouraged. So everyone falls, but entrepreneurs actually get back up and keep doing it. And that's all I've got.
So you talked about how failure 3,
Right?
agency number.
Syntactical.
Syntactical. You learned that culture was important. What type of things now do you do, and how do you budget for those appropriately so that the company doesn't go under?
Okay, good question. So I'll repeat it so you guys can hear it. So the question was, how did I learn, or what am I doing about this last bullet, the cultural issues that we had at the last company? So we did have some employees for a while, and they were disgruntled, and we really just kind of tuned them out. So we were too busy working on the actual operations of the day-to-day tasking for our client, and we didn't really focus on the employees. So one thing that I do now is I actively reach out to my folks. So I will ping them on Slack or text message and see how they're doing if I haven't heard from them in a while. I treat them like any other partnership as far as like how you would treat a client, where if you haven't heard from an active client in a while, you'll reach out to them proactively. So I have a CRM that we use called Contactually, and it lists all of your important contacts, and I have a category for employees. And if I haven't interacted with an employee in a couple of days, it dings me. That's a very important relationship, and I want to make sure that those folks know that I'm around, I'm thinking about them. It's just like any other kind of relationship. And if you're gone, then you can't foster that relationship. So one is trying to interact a lot more with the employees. I take them out to lunch every 2 weeks. Like clockwork, we're going out to lunch. It's on the company. Budget-wise, I don't have a budget line item for it, but it's not that much money. So we've got, sometimes I take contractors out as well, or the part-timers. So each time we go out, it's between 7 and 10 people, depending on who's available and whatnot. And it costs between $50 and $90 every 2 weeks. So that's 26 times a year. So let's say it costs $100 each time, and there's 26 times that we do that in a year, $2,600. I don't even need to budget for it, frankly. It's a no-brainer. It's not that much money.
What do you talk about at those meetings?
Not work, usually. I try to avoid talking about work altogether. and just kind of hanging out. So they're not even meetings. We go to lunch, we eat, we hang out. We don't talk business. Now, business comes up, it's natural, but we have dedicated company meetings once a month for that. And that's where I go through everything that's going on at a business level. Yes?
All right, so you dealt very well with the failure side. How do you handle success?
Okay, good point.
Because how do you end up not like a Mike Tyson that blows through $300 million?
Sure,
or an MC Hammer that blows through $100 million and ends up with nothing?
Yep.
Because they never were trained on how to handle their success.
Sure. All right, so the question was, how do you handle success? Certainly, you don't want to handle it like Mike Tyson, like you said. You don't want it to go to your head. If you do, you're going to start making decisions that you wouldn't have normally made previous to that success going to your head. For me, you probably heard, you heard me talk about this and how I'm actually a little uncomfortable talking about success because I don't feel like I've gotten there yet. So for me, anytime I do experience a little bit of success, I put it in perspective. This could all end tomorrow, right? I could get sued by a client and they take everything we have. You never know what's going to happen. So for me, I'm pretty paranoid and I'm pretty protective of the company and the employees. And I don't overspend. I just talked about taking everyone out to lunch, and it may seem lavish, but at $2,500, $2,600 a year, it's nothing. And what you get in return is so much more valuable than $2,600. So I don't even consider that a luxury. That's something you absolutely have to do to show the people that are most important to you that they're meaningful to you. So just to kind of wrap it up, don't let it go to your head. Continue to be vigilant and protect what you've created, and know that this is a journey that you're on.
Have you found that building the culture now has worked better, and have you gone through any challenges with it?
Absolutely, yeah. So have we had challenges building the culture? Absolutely. So it's a journey. We're not there yet. Do I have employees that are disgruntled? Yeah. Do I work on that? Yes, I work on those relationships. I try to have honest conversations with whoever has an issue at any given time. Hopefully some of those issues go away because we've talked about it or they've been addressed. There's probably lots of issues that are still out there, right? I don't think that's ever going to go away. All you can really do is continue to work at it and have open, honest conversations and open dialogue with your folks.
What kind of challenge, or what are some of the disgruntled items?
I think it almost always, okay, so what are the items that cause folks to be disgruntled? My perspective is that it always is a communications issue. Every challenge that I believe we have in business is a communications issue. Every single one. There are very, very few challenges that we have that are technical in nature, or something like that. It's almost always that I've done a poor job communicating expectations, or the employee or client has done a poor job communicating with me, or we think we understand but we don't. Once you have that good communication going, though, you can resolve almost any problem. Did you have a question?
Yeah. How do you feel? Do you feel like your paranoia impacts your decision making, as far as you're not wanting to take risk, or there's some risk that you don't take because you're afraid that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back?
Okay, so does my paranoia about the company restrict what I do? To a certain extent, yes. I try not to make rash decisions, but I've also taken calculated risks. So the first big risk was hiring the first employee. It was a huge risk, and I thought about it for months. And I wanted to make sure that the timing was right. And frankly, I didn't know if we were going to make enough money to pay both of us. And so I literally told my wife, I'm going to hire her, and she's going to get paid every 2 weeks no matter what. I just don't know if I'll have enough to pay myself. And I basically warned my wife, but I said, this is the only way that we're going to grow. I can't wait for the perfect situation because it just never comes. You just have to look at the risk and determine if you're willing to take that risk, if it makes sense. In that case, it made sense. Another example of growth for us was, frankly, when we moved out of here and across the street into our own space. We were constricted by space. We'd been here for a year and a half, but we just had that little office back there. It was a great opportunity. I thank Zach all the time. Thank you very much. I mean, it was a really good opportunity. We met a lot of great people. We got a lot of work out of it, but it was time to move. We had just literally run out of space. Going across the street meant signing a lease, paying money every single month, a lot more than we were, contributing here. So our expenses went way up, and the liability went up. But it was a calculated risk. I knew that we needed it for the space, but I also knew that it was going to add to our marketing as well. So our space is not just a physical place where we sit every single day. We decorated it nice. We invite clients over whenever there's a potential client that I'm talking to. I always have them come down to our office if I can, if they're willing to, so they can see the office. It's on Granby Street. It's on ground level. They get wowed a little bit. It's not a spectacular office. It's only 925 square feet. So it's not the best office in the world, but it's the best I got, right?
It's still nice, though.
It's nice.
See?
Right?
It's
Thank
nice.
you. It's nice, but it's not amazing. There are other companies out there that have way better offices, right? But it's what I have, and I'm going to play to the strength, but it was a calculated risk even doing that. So sometimes you come to these decision points and you just have to, don't be rash. Don't do it right away. It's not an impulse. You have to make sure that this kind of works for you. And then think about, well, what happens if it doesn't? What's my fallback plan? Think about it like a risk, just like any other kind of risk. What happens if it doesn't work out? What's the worst case scenario? What would I do if I couldn't pay the bill, right? So, yep. Yes, Deanie. Oh, sorry, Deanie. Yep.
How did you know, or what were the metrics that you kind of went by when you decided to hire your first client? Was it a certain amount of revenue for a certain amount of months that made you feel comfortable? Was it just something different that you wanted that person to do? What made you?
This is hiring the first employee. Like what triggered it? When did I know?
Other than just being too busy. How did you know you could handle it?
Well, up until that point, I was doing all the work myself, and I was working on a project where I was the project manager, and I was the coder because I was the only one in the company, and I had to focus on the coding in order to get the project done. And frankly, I screwed up the project management side of it. And I'm a professional project manager. I have a certification from PMI saying I'm a project management professional. And I screwed that part up because I couldn't do both. I could not focus on both sides of our business. And so I realized I was letting things slip. So that was indicator number one. Indicator number two for me was I was in the middle of that big project, and I had another one that I just signed, and it was coming down the pike. And so I didn't want to repeat the issues that I had encountered on the current project on the next project. And I realized we have enough runway here with this new project for another 6 months. So if I hire someone, I've got for sure enough work for both of us for 6 months. So then the challenge was, what's it going to take to get more work? And that's the risk, right? So for me, I felt comfortable knowing that I had a good buffer. It didn't have to be 100% mitigated, like the whole risk, but I knew that most of that risk was mitigated, and then I just had to think about what's the likelihood that I can go out and get more work to keep us both busy. And when I looked at the numbers, it made sense for us. So,
But it was a lot.
but I talked for months with a lot of people about it. It was an excruciating decision. It was the hardest decision that I've made for this business yet, hands down. The first one. Yeah.
Okay, well, I have a question a bit multifaceted. It's about going from that transition from being, one person or a partnership to an agency. When you started 80/20, was it just you or you and one other person? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I know it took you a while to get to that point, but did you go straight to hiring or did you try other things like subbing and such?
Yeah. All right. So I'll
And-
repeat for the folks watching at home. So question one was 80/20, was it just me initially? Was there anyone else? And the answer is it was just me. Started off at the dining room table, literally. Unpacked the backpack in the morning, set up shop, and then when the kids got home and it was time for dinner, I'd pack it all back up. That lasted about a week. And then I got some space in Chesapeake. I was there for a couple months and I ended up here. Just me. So for the first year and a half or so, it was just me. And then the second part was what? Oh, contracting?
Yes, before you've hired your first employee, did you try things like, subbing out work or that sort of thing?
Yes. Okay, so did we subcontract or do anything in between one-man show and two-person company? Yes, contract. So we did a lot of contracting. I would hire developers that I'd worked with in the past. The very first contractor was someone in California for a client in California, and they needed a particular skill set that I didn't offer technically, and I found someone in California and hired that person as a part-time contractor. And then as we got more work, I did it again with some other projects, and it worked fairly well, but it wasn't perfect. One problem that I have with the contracting contingency or scenario is it's an arm's length transaction, right? They're a contractor. They don't, they're not your employee. They're not your staff. So you're both kind of like a distance from one another. You work together, you cooperate, but I wasn't getting a lot of times what I needed from that contractor as far as commitment and time. A couple of contractors said they were really excited about working with us, and then they just disappeared. And so I wasn't getting the commitment that I needed to fulfill our work for our clients. And I realized later on that I wasn't making the commitment to those people. So that's when my thought about contracting changed, and employees changed. I wanted a commitment, which meant that I had to give a commitment first. Right? So I wanted to establish a good two-way relationship and commitment in both directions in order to fulfill what we needed for our work. Now we still use contractors, but that's just so that we don't hire and fire based on demand.
Yeah.
So we add contractors to when we have a lot of work.
Now, do all your people work on site, or do you have some remote workers? Or
So everyone that works for us as an employee is in this market. More than half work out of the office. A couple of guys work on site primarily at a client, one big client. We have two guys that do that. And then we have part-timers. One part-timer's in Florida. She used to be here, then she moved. But she did a good job. She could do it remote. And then the other one is in Virginia Beach, part-time. And she doesn't come to the office much, but she gets together with us for the lunches and whatnot, and she interacts with the clients on site for them. So it's a mix.
okay, well, cool.
Yeah.
What do you do the majority of your day?
So the majority of what I do now is business development. I would like actually to do more programming, and I'm trying to figure out how I can take some of those other responsibilities and delegate them. So I do have an assistant. That's the lady, Katya, that works in Florida, and she's been with us for a little over a year now. And I can take a lot of the administrative stuff and train her, and now she can do it instead of me doing it. So something as simple as invoicing. I've been doing all the invoicing every 2 weeks for the last 3 years. And I just trained her on how to invoice. And we just had a conversation about a particular client and how their invoice is a little bit different than everyone else's. And also how to do things like follow up with some clients if they get late and stuff like that. So that's been a huge help. So she's been able to help with things like sending out the invoices, which result in us getting paid, and then also following up with the clients and being the bad cop. By me delegating the bad cop role, it means that I can continue to do what I'm best at, really, which is kind of be the good cop. Which is why clients come to you in the first place. They have a problem, they need it solved, and you can help them. You can be the good cop. You can get them what they need. But if I'm also the bad cop by harassing them about payments, it doesn't work well. So it's nice to separate those kinds of roles. But to answer the question, mostly right now it's business development, and I need to figure out honestly how to take some of those other responsibilities and move them elsewhere. I'll probably remain in business development even though I want to code, because if I'm not selling for the company, no one is. And right now, no one can sell what we do like I can. Doesn't mean I'm a great...
I was going to say, describe business development, from your perspective.
And I'm not saying I'm a great salesperson, I'm not. But no one can sell what we do like I can. I'm absolutely the best salesperson for our company. So, you want me to describe?
I was just like, what do you mean by by business development? So marketing, keeping selling to the next client.
Yep. Marketing, handling leads, communicating with prospects, getting together with them. This morning I met with someone at the coffee shop down the street and didn't know if it was going to be a fit or not. And we just kind of talked through his idea, and I helped shape his idea a little bit to get him focused. And that'll probably turn into, or it could turn into a project. We'll see. But basically, there's a lot of work that has to happen between the general public that's out there and kind of working your sales funnel and getting to the point where there's a signed contract and you can actually start doing what you do. So all of that work leading up to the contract is what I focus on right now. But I'm still very heavily involved in operations. So I need to probably extract myself from operations sooner rather than later. Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're doing? Because I know, so you have employees, and you also mentioned that you want to remove yourself from these different situations.
Right.
What are the steps that you're taking or the things that you're looking at to make yourself duplicatable so that way you can train someone to do exactly how you do, if not better, at this particular area?
Right. Okay. So how do I clone myself?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I have right now is a couple of trusted individuals, people that have been with us for a year or more, and I've seen what they're capable of. I know the capabilities of my entire staff, and for me, what I find is that what I've been doing recently is when I find myself doing something that I feel like I shouldn't be doing, I try to figure out who else could do it. So it's really kind of strange because you're really like working yourself out of a job if you do it right. I mean, honestly, you are. It's like with invoicing. It didn't take me that long. I knew like how to invoice different clients, and most of them are a little bit different from one another for whatever reason. And it would take me 2 hours to get all the invoices out. But that's 2 hours that I could be, here talking to you guys, making a video for marketing purposes, right? There's a lot of other things that I can do in that 2 hour time frame. So if I can take that 2 hours and have someone else do it, great. How do I get someone else to the point where they can do it? For me, it's about writing down some policies. Certainly you have to start by getting in your mind a concrete idea of what it is that you want to happen in the company. So you have to sit down and write those policies and procedures, make sure that they are the way that you want them, because then you start enforcing them, right? So as an example, when we send out our invoices, we have time entries. We bill by the hour, right? And so when a client says, hey, you billed me for 2 hours and there's no comment at all, I don't know what that was for, that's a problem. Or when the client says, hey, this references GitHub issue number 27, I don't know what that is, that's a problem. So I had to write down in our company policies the way that you write comments. the appropriate way of writing a comment on your time entry. It's partly for the employee so that they can remember what they did. It's partly for me, frankly, so that when I look at it, I can know if that makes sense or not. Did you really spend all day working on this one thing? Right? So I need that kind of feedback I need that kind of information from their comments. And then it's also for the client to let them know what was done to justify the charge. But also, it's marketing. There's a marketing aspect. Because those comments are not only what we did, but what have you done for me lately, and why should I pay you to come back and do more of this? So it's not just fixed bug, right? It's fixed bug so that you can get 1,000 more clients, right? Something like, you know what I mean? Something like that.
Okay.
So and it's legit. I'm not saying make anything up, but there's always a reason that we do these things. We don't just fix bugs. Why do we fix bugs, or why do we add this feature? Because there's a business value to it. So, talk about that a little bit.
So in essence, you have a playbook for each area, each concept of your business.
Not quite. It's a work in progress, for sure. So I've gone through the trouble of writing down, in this particular instance, the comments and how they should look. But now, the next thing is the enforcement. It's up to me to look, and I realized that was a problem because I wasn't always looking at these charges. I'd only look every 2 weeks. So now I've trained someone, my assistant, to, on a regular basis, every couple of days, go in and look at those comments. Do they make sense to her? Is it just a link to some issue over here in an issue tracker that our client may not have access to? If it doesn't make sense to her, then there's probably a problem. So I've trained her. Contact the employee, tell him or her to expand. And if you don't understand how to write a comment, refer to company policy, paragraph number 4 or whatever. Right? So it's a lot about getting your thoughts down on paper, and then a lot about training and figuring out who's going to do these things. Because the whole idea is that at some point, you should be able to extract yourself, right? I mean, wouldn't it be great if your business just ran itself? You had a 4-hour work week, Yeah. That would be amazing, because then you're free to either focus more on the company and build it up more, or go do something else. Yes?
How does 80/20 get more customers?
How do we get customers? Right now, it's almost exclusively through my personal network. And it almost always has been. So it's people that I know who know someone. But we also do a lot of other things. Like this past year, we connected with Deanie, and we're doing events. So we put on events for our clients and for our VIPs, if you will. So we do several events. We wanted to do them once a month, but that was getting to be a bit much. As an example, one of the things that we're planning on doing in 2 weeks is we've booked the American Rover. It's a sailing ship, and right here in downtown Norfolk. And we're going to invite VIPs. So who are VIPs? Basically, it's anyone that's going to talk good about us, or as a client, or as a potential client, or knows someone who knows someone that I want to meet. Right? And so we've booked it for a sunset cruise, 2-hour cruise, food, drinks. How much will that cost? Probably something like $3,000. Which sounds like a lot for sure, and we've definitely discussed whether it makes sense or not. But if we get one client out of that, just one, it makes sense.
Has your ads done anything?
The ads in here. So
I saw
every
a magazine with an 80/20 ad.
all right, so we do 2 print ads. One is in here every 2 weeks. It's a black and white, really small, kind of like business card size ad. And then the second one is a color ad that comes out in the Inside Business magazine, which they call Leadership. And that's a 1/4 page, and it's color. Have we got work out of that? No. No, we haven't.
What about Twitter?
Twitter, yes.
You did now.
Yeah. Yes, so on Twitter, we were spending about $100 a week, which again, sounds like a lot. I did it for probably about, I don't know, 12 weeks or so. And then I wasn't seeing anything come of it, so I killed it. And a couple weeks later, got an email from someone. It literally said, I want to hire you. He came in, I asked how he heard about us, and it was from the Twitter ad.
Did you revive it after that?
No, I haven't. I probably should, though. Actually, I'm working with Jeremy from John Rich Media, and we're going to revive advertising online. So, hey, we've had failures in advertising. We've had some successes. Advertising hasn't really done a tremendous amount for us. Still, we're pretty close to 100% Erik's personal network, but that's a problem too, because my network only goes so far, and only so many people in that network need what we do. All right, did you have a question? Yeah.
The relationship with your customers, is it, I know with custom software, it's usually a project that you've done. Do you have found a way to make it a continuous relationship?
So how to make custom software more than a one-time project? It's a challenge. A lot of times for clients, we actually recommend that they build the minimal viable product first. And we give them a lot of business advice too. It's not just technical, we're going to build your site and you're done. We kind of coach them. Like I was saying, we met this morning with someone down the street, and he didn't really know where to take this business that he wants to create online. So we coach him, and it's usually towards the minimal viable product because it makes the most sense, honestly. It's the best decision for the client. Don't invest a ton to build the whole thing like I did with my examples. Build the smallest that you can, try to get into the marketplace, get customers. If that works, call me, we'll build out more features. So a lot of our clients are repeat clients because of that kind of philosophy. I didn't do it to get more work necessarily, I did it because it's the right thing for the client. I don't want to see a client spend a ton of money and never get any customers of their own. I'd rather see them spend less money, try it, learn from their failures, either abandon it and move on to something else or tweak. Yeah. Yes, Deanie.
When you bring in new people into your company and you're kind of like just opening up your shop basically to show them all about what you're doing and what you're doing correctly, are you ever afraid that they may take your proprietary information and start their own company or something?
It's a concern, but it's not a huge concern because it's not just about being exposed to processes and ways that you do business that are going to give someone everything that they need to start their own business. It takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of mistakes. You have to be capitalized. You have to be motivated. So there's a lot, and you have to want that, right? Some people are just, that's not for them. It's just not for them, and I totally respect that. So there's a lot of factors besides just being exposed that you have to consider. So I'm not really that worried about it. Could it happen? It could, but it's more important, I think, to be open and transparent and show everybody what's going on and get them efficient in the business sooner rather than later, and treat them well. We pay well, we have good benefits, not the best, right? Other companies probably pay more, but overall it's a good package, it's a good value, and we want to make sure that the employees are generally happy enough that they want to stay. Yeah. Now we've lost people. The very first employee decided that we weren't for her. She had found a better fit for her, and at first I was certainly a little disappointed, but we talked through it, and I'm okay with it now. Yeah, I just saw her recently. Everything's fine. It happens. All right, I don't know what time it is, but I think I've answered questions for way longer than my presentation.
Erik Olson, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Zach.